acute liver failure, metabolic causes. When we look, we know the definition of acute liver failure has been recently revised by the Pediatric Acute Liver Failure Study Group. And what they have shown that prothrombin time more than 15 seconds with hepatic encephalopathy or more than 20 seconds without hepatic encephalopathy. The reason, this is very appropriate to the previous case which has been shown. Basically, you may not be able to find out hepatic encephalopathy in young babies. And therefore, we have to bank upon the prothrombin time, which is a very important marker of definition of acute liver failure. So we have some concerns. We have raised those concerns in our our guidelines. That's a different matter, but here we'll hold on to this definition. These are the three important studies you can see here on acute liver failure in children. This is the PULSE group, 348 patients, Dhawan's group on the neonatal ALF, and also a series on transfer that has been done for the sake of acute liver failure. And look at this data. Very interesting. We have 10% of metabolic etiology for acute liver failure in pediatric age group across. And of these, you will find respiratory chain defects. Here, less than 3 years, more than 3 years. And there's a big distinction between the two groups. You have respiratory chain defects, fatty acid oxidation defect, mitochondrial cytopathy, 13 cases over here, versus tyrosinemia, galactosemia, fructose intolerance, smaller number of patients. And when we cross the age group of more than 3 years, what we find is Wilson's disease tops the list. And there are very few, actually, metabolic disorders above 3 years of age, excepting few as mitochondrial cytopathy. When we go to the neonates, young babies, what we find here, the commonest cause is neonatal hemochromatosis. And this is the Western data. And the metabolic causes, again, they are there, but they are smaller in proportion. The next is, when we look at the children, infants, neonates, infants, and this is the transplantation, actually, the study where they have shown that metabolic disorders basically are on the higher front. That is 42% versus neonatal hemochromatosis around 16%. So they assume importance. The metabolic disorders to be identified in children, even in the youngest of the young child, we have to look for the metabolic disorders. And Wilson's disease, of course, would hold the ground for children who are more than 3 years of age, 4 years of age. Now, what are the clues for a clinician? Believe me, it took me 45 days, including one of the residents, looking at the metabolic diseases in children. And tomorrow, most of it I will be showing you tomorrow, how to investigate these patients, a very difficult area. Maternal history as a clue to etiology, mother an important link, and therefore SIP deaths, especially with jaundice, the following conditions: placental edema, intrauterine hydrops, neonatal hemochromatosis, mitochondrial cytopathies. Clues as per the timing of presentation. When should you suspect? At birth or soon after neonatal hemochromatosis, even mitochondrial hepatopathy, tyrosinemia, galactosemia. Then when we see it, examining the baby, we all know that IUGR, cataract can occur in galactosemia, abnormal odor, skin rashes, very important, fatty acid oxidation defects, large spleen, we have different disorders, and seizures, of course, can occur in many conditions, and especially it may occur in herpes simplex infection. Now, encephalopathy, it is different from the adults. And the pediatric, that is the stages of encephalopathy. In fact, stage 1 and 2 you cannot distinguish. Stage 3, yes, they have got hyperreflexia, they have got stupor, and stage 4 has got two actually subgroups. When they are rousable by painful stimulus and the reflexes are absent, it is stage 4A. And when there is no response, it is stage 4B. So this is how the encephalopathy can be graded in children. Already, neonatal hemochromatosis, I'm not going to dilate upon this. I just asked Dr. Pramod, is he going to talk tomorrow on this issue? He said yes, therefore I will not discuss much on this. And I will go to another important thing for our Indian scenario. See, if you have got high serum ferritin, this is the median many studies have found, more than 2,000. And it can vary from 415 to 100,000. So this is always whenever we have the patients in our wards, ferritin level is 500. What should we do? Should we go ahead further for a lip biopsy or not? So this is the literature what is being subjected at now at the moment, which is being cited for lip biopsies. Low serum transferrin, that's all right. Lip biopsies best for the Indian situations, because MRI for pancreas or many other tissues to look for the iron deposition may be difficult for our actually settings. Taking them to those MRI rooms, keeping them there, they are already sick, and therefore the lip biopsy probably would be the best bet under Indian situations. Tyrosinemia, we all know, but what we should realize that 60% of type 1 tyrosinemia present as ALF in the first 2 years of life, including the neonatal period. That is what that has been highlighted just now. And the presentation can be same as galactosemia. There can be no distinction. The differences may not be there. And diagnosis, again, the question was raised on alpha-fetoproteins. We searched for it, and the mean levels which have been described with tyrosinemia is somewhat this. What is this? 160,000 micrograms per ml versus the normal full-term baby 84,000. It is double that. When it is more than that, then we can say serum ferritin, this alpha-fetoprotein is raised in these babies. Galactosemia, I think Dr. Anshu is going to talk tomorrow on cholestatic part, so I am not going to show it here right now, although it's a very important entity. Mitochondrial cytopathy. See, basically, when we look at the literature, we find there are two subsets, fatty acid oxidation defect and respiratory chain defects. There are overlaps. They may look clinically alike, and distinction becomes at times difficult. They have to be suspected in the first week of life or later. They have got transient hypoglycemia, and very importantly, they have got the neurological involvement. Early liver failure can be the manifestation of mitochondrial cytopathy. When we look at the associations, basically, they are mostly neurological associations, 36% of them. They have got cardiac anomaly, cardiac manifestation, 24% of them, and liver involvement is 20%. So it's a multi-system actually disease where liver gets involved as a part of this disorder. And fatty acid oxidation defects as a subset of mitochondrial cytopathy, acute liver failure can occur in these patients. In fact, Rice-like syndrome can also be a manifestation of fatty acid oxidation defect. And here, when we look at the subsets of fatty acid oxidation, they are huge numbers. But mainly, majority of them are as a result of very long chain fatty acid disorders, long chain, medium chain, short chain, and disorders of ketogenesis. And a small set, small subset, it is not a major subset, fatty acid oxidation defect, that is the carnitine deficiency, and among them, one of them is actually treatable. Therefore, our emphasis has to be how we can identify this particular disorder. Mostly, carnitine deficiency, although uncommon among the fatty acid oxidation defects, mostly they affect the infants, young children, exercise-induced, and is a life-saving. Actually, you can give the carnitine supplementation and salvage them. This is the algorithm. In fact, I have tried to make, there may be deficiencies in this, but I think by and large, it will give you the diagnosis of these metabolic disorders. Here you see you have a clinical suspicion, investigation, acidosis, do ammonia levels, look for glucose levels, look for the lactic acid. And then the second stage, depending upon what you are getting, you can do the urine ketones, you can actually make the diagnosis. See, urine ketones, positive respiratory chain defects, organic acidemias, negative, and in fatty acid oxidation defects. So actually what you should do, I think Dr. Abba should give you this kind, either by the mails or a write-up of this can be circulated, and this can be a guide for suspecting these mitochondrial cytopathies, organoacidemias, and urea cycle defects. So this is a very nice actually bifurcation, segregation of different disorders by using these biochemical parameters. And nutshell of that is that fatty acid oxidation defects, when we look at acidosis, it may or may not be there. Respiratory chain defects, yes, positive. Organic acidemias, persistent acidosis is there. So acidosis is a major manifestation of organic acidemias, although it can also occur in the respiratory chain diseases. And urine ketones in fatty acid oxidation defect, non-ketotic hypoglycemia. That is very important for fatty acid oxidation defects. For respiratory chain defects, it is actually the urine ketones may be positive and acidosis may be there. For organic acidemias, again urine ketones are positive. And based on this actually table, you can come closer to the diagnosis of one of these disorders. Hereditary fructose intolerance, we should start recognizing this condition. And we know when we give the fructose load, which may be in the form of sugars, juices, honey, during the weaning period, in fact, before that also, our mothers, our parents, our families also give water and added sugar, and they feed even before the weaning. So if there is a correlation with that, there is a temporal sequence with that, you should suspect fructose intolerance also. But here I would like to say, it's not isolated liver. Dr. Amdekar made a point in the morning, in the afternoon, that we should look at all the systems. It is not just one system. GI symptoms predominate here: protracted vomiting, diarrhea, and they may have abdominal discomfort in addition to the liver involvement. Now look at this thing. They may have avoidance to sweets, hypoglycemia, seizures, and later they may have psychiatric symptoms in older children or in adults. And hepatic causes, hepatic manifestations are transaminase elevation, organomegaly, progressive liver disease, and also as acute liver failure. And this is not difficult to be treated. It can be treated by dietary modifications. And therefore, we should be alive to this condition of fructose intolerance. But they have both GI as well as liver manifestations. Wolman's disease has been hinted at today. Wolman's disease, stormy onset, first 2 weeks of life, they present. And you see here, sick child with failure to thrive, neonatal cholestasis, or with liver failure, organomegaly. But again, you should remember that diarrhea and vomiting are associated manifestations of Wolman's disease. So not isolated liver. And suspicion, whenever you suspect, I think as a protocol, we should do USG. Adrenal calcifications make the diagnosis in these patients. And there's a rapid death in 3 to 6 months' time. And this is one of our patients. This is a 3-month-old baby with neonatal cholestasis early in the neonatal life, sick child, diarrhea as a major manifestation, sieve ducts, and you can see the adrenal calcifications in this patient. Treatment of major disorders. We know neonatal hemochromatosis will be talked tomorrow, but I would only say that the cocktails so far in the literature have shown no benefit actually in terms of much of survival. And most of it, in fact, now the newer regimes have come, that is the IVIG, either in the pregnant ladies who are suspected to have the baby with congenital hemochromatosis, that will be the second pregnancy, of course, and also babies who are after birth proven to have congenital hemochromatosis, where there is the role of IVIG. For fatty acid oxidation defects, why should we work so hard to diagnose these conditions? That's also a question. Carnitine, life-saving in primary carnitine deficiency, cocktails are there, and respiratory chain defects. There are several defects known: poor prognosis, coenzyme Q, cocktail, carnitine, vitamin E may be given, but their outcome is extremely poor. They invariably die. In fact, liver transplantation also is not an indication for this condition, respiratory chain defects, or what we call this mitochondrial cytopathy. So my probably algorithm would be management of infants and young children with ALF, suspect ALF. They have generally jaundice, young babies, coagulopathy, even isolated. If you may get a congenital hemochromatosis patient and already there is a sieve death, the patient is kept in the, whenever the baby is born, you would like to do the PT in this patient. There will be no jaundice, absolutely no jaundice, and PT is abnormal. And over a period of 3 to 4 days, you will find that jaundice will appear. So one has to be know about that these patients can actually present with coagulopathy, may not have initially elevation of the bilirubin. How do we, therefore, what should be our proposal for investigation? This is a proposal, not accepted yet. Screening for ALF in young babies, infants, or less than 2 years of age, blood sugars, urine, serum ferritin levels, serum alpha-fetoprotein, plasma ammonia. Plasma ammonia becomes an important parameter for knowing the metabolic disorders. ABG including lactate, urine for ketones, and ultrasound for looking at calcification. And depending upon what permutation combination, what is the clinical setting of these patients, then the specific investigations can be done. And particularly, that is Galliput. One of our faculty members said here, Galliput. We had patients where galactosemia, Galliput was done outside. That time we didn't have the quantitative estimation. And Galliput negative, subjected to biliary atresia surgery, open, duct normal, and thereafter when we found what is happening, they said it is negative, and in fact it was positive. So because of that, you may have problems in there has to be validity. And that is why we developed a quantitative galactose 1-phosphate uridyl transferase test in my own institute. We don't believe in the tests which are done outside by the laboratories. We may give you different values. And it has occurred in many other conditions. So it's very important to have the valid reports even if they are done in the private sector. Management, we all know how acute liver failure is managed. And herpes, I have already made a comment that we should always try to give acyclovir when we have a very strong suspicion of herpes simplex infection in young babies. Now, question is, just now we had a very good case. That is of Wilson's disease, difficulty in diagnosis. What is the difficulty? When you get ALF and Wilson's disease, the difficulty is serum ceruloplasmin, as Dr. Rakesh mentioned, is acute phase reactant. If you get higher serum ceruloplasmin where you are suspecting Wilson's disease, that may be incorrect. But if you are getting it low, that is correct. Therefore, second point, 45% of renal failure, urinary copper cannot be assessed. So what we got in that patient was 104, 105, which may not be, I don't know what was the creatinine level. What was? 1 point? So that suggests that whenever there is a renal failure associated, your urinary copper may not be there. It may not be that much elevated. Liver biopsy cannot be done. We can't do in coagulopathy. KF ring is absent in 50% of Wilson's disease patients with ALF and not a bedside test. You can't send him for slit lamp examination to a lab. Then you see here, modest elevation of transaminases. This is what the literature is telling us. Normal or subnormal alkaline phosphatase, and this is the guideline, ASLD guideline, Hepatology 2008. Coombs negative hemolytic anemia, because Coombs positive may get an autoimmune liver disease. Renal failure in 45% patients. How to diagnose? And these are the indices which we have talked about on that case. ALP, bilirubin ratio, AST-ALT ratio, serum copper, serum plasmin, say hemoglobin because of hemolysis. And when you combine these two combined about ALP and bilirubin and AST-ALT ratios, almost specificity is 100%. And what are the caveats? These are all adult studies basically. Children, the one study which has shown that children with alkaline phosphate bilirubin ratio less than 1, they were not getting, they had Wilson's disease, but ratio was less than 1 rather than less than 4. Treatment option, still, people believe that we should give trial. As Anupam said, if you have encephalopathy, 100% has to go for transplantation, but short of that, you may try, wherever the options of transplantation are not there, D-penicillin or trientine, and the same dose is 20 milligram per kg body weight per day, ROLT. New Wilson index, we all know about it. This is for actually how you can allocate the patients for transplantation or manage them on medical treatment. And this is the new one where Wilson score more than 11 is to go for transplantation. Wilson score less than 11 can be treated with medical management. This is not for ALF. This is for overall all patients of Wilson's disease. But there's again a caveat here. This is a study, 2011, 6 Wilson's disease, all alive. Score more than 11 in 3 cases. So it's not necessary that we take as the tight compartment, 11 is the cutoff and you go for it. Still, we have to think on those patients. And then these are with IV hemolysis. See, all transplanted. 1 year patients, that's fine. 7 pulmonary hepatic failure patients, no OLT, 4 survived on D-penicillamine and trientine, all ALF patients with Wilson's disease. And another OLT survived, 13 survived, 16 FHF. Without OLT, 3 died. So there is a conflicting report. But better is, if you have the best choice, go for transplantation. If not, then you can still try the medical management. And you see here, I want to show you one case here. Just, I will not show you details. 10-year boy, jaundice 10 days, Coca-Cola urine pallor, that means he had hemolysis. You see the bilirubin level 54. AST, ALT 359, 18 is the ALT, alkaline phosphatase 36. And here you see IV hemolysis, hemoglobin down to 6, grade 2 encephalopathy. PRBC, all parameters of hemolysis are present. G6PD is normal. And following that, KF ring was done in this patient because the sensorium was relatively better. Serum ceruloplasmin 13, 24-hour urine copper was very high in this patient. And then you see D-penicillamine was given. INR, which was 5-year, that means almost 60 seconds. And here INR 3, INR 1.8 going down. And then you see here what has happened. Total bilirubin 3.2, AST, ALT, alkaline phosphatase 266, and this patient completely recovered. But here there can be a question. If Dr. Rakesh is given this case, he is a very, very good, he has very good analysis. He will say, do you think this response is to D-penicillamine or is the natural course of the disease in this patient? Certainly yes. That will be a question. Is it the response to D-penicillamine or not? So we can't say that. It's very difficult unless I know how many days before his recovery I have given D-penicillamine, how many days before his INR started settling down. That may be a question there. So little 1 or 2 slides with your permission, sir. Always we talk about the Reye's syndrome given in the books. And you see here, these are the studies on Reye's syndrome. And what they have shown that UK study shows young babies, 10 to 15 months. And USA study shows also in children in 6 to 7 years of age. Australia 1 to 19 years of age. And what was happening in them, 93% had antecedent viral illness, all of them when we combined. 5 to 100% had aspirin ingestion. And in India, you see here, we had, what was the diagnostic criteria taken, I don't know that exactly. But India, we had in 1970-80, I know from Bangalore, Dr. Bangappa had done a lot of work on Reye's syndrome. He presented. And now it is decreased in 30 years, 2010. Is it a real decrease or something else has happened? So you can hear they have sudden onset of vomiting. They have got, they may be anectic, they are lethargic, irritable, rapid deterioration. They develop seizures, they have got raised tension, and they develop coma and die. And what is the outcome in these patients? You see, look at the parameters which we have collected together from all these studies, looking at what is the parameters there. See here, prothrombin time is not very much actually deranged in these patients. Although their SGOT, SGPT are also on the higher side. Ammonia levels, again, they are somewhat high. Bilirubin, in fact, not increased. But we know of patients of Reye's syndrome where they may have bilirubin even up to 5 milligrams per deciliter. Ultrasound showing fatty liver. And natural course, what has been described, 60 to 80% survive, 40% die. And on follow-up, this is a very interesting point. On follow-up, 25 to 70% later are diagnosed as inborn errors of metabolism. They had this disease, they had this manifestation, those who recovered. And of them, it is thought that more than 80% have actually fatty acid oxidation defect. So basically, does Reye's syndrome, is it a myth or a reality? In fact, it may be the disorders which are manifesting, they are the inborn errors of metabolism, they are manifesting in this fashion. Some of them may die, some of them may recover and develop the disorders later. And so therefore we have to take cognizance that all those who are coming as Reye's syndrome may have actually fatty acid oxidation defects, and we should look for it.